America and the Kurds. This one's going to be just on the history of not only the U.S. but the West, Western countries, NATO, and their involvement with the Kurds in many wars over the past 50 years. And it just shows why many other groups around the United States do, around the world, not the United States, have trust issues with trusting the United States and the West. It's come from our treatment and a lot of what's happened in the wars. So in 1975, we had the Iran-Iraq War, where the Kurds were used in the fighting against Iraq in the war. Then in 1991, we had the Gulf War, where President Bush urged Kurds to rise up and revolt against Saddam Hussein. And then in 2003, the Iraq War, Kurds were used as U.S. ground allies in the invasion of Iraq. And then in 2019, we had the Syria, also ISIS conflict, to where the Kurds had several groups that stood up and helped to defeat the caliphate. And we're going to talk about the results of that. In 1975 was the end for the Iran-Iraq war, and it came to a peace agreement that was made to where the U.S. sided with Saddam Hussein, who had killed a lot of Kurds, who the U.S. was also aided, and the Kurds were just abandoned by the U.S. During this decision. It was not a great day for the Kurdish people. A lot of them died, and Saddam killed a lot of them from this war. And as the statement says here, our movement and people are being destroyed in an unbelievable manner with the silence from the U.S. In 2014, 2019, actually, hold up, let me go back. This also goes into the 2003 war as well, when the U.S. invaded Iraq. Because we invaded Iraq, the Kurds helped us, and then we left. I mean, we kind of helped them, but we still kind of abandoned them too as well. It wasn't the best thing for them came out, because for them helping us with Iraq, they were supposed to get their own land, which they still kind of do have in Erbil. If you look up at Erbil in Iraq, that was established under the 2003 war. Okay, 2014, we have the rise of ISIS in the war in Syria, U.S. Syria, um, and the aid and weapons were provided with the Kurdish. You had the stand up, the YPG, PKK, and other groups in that area, which was established with the backing of the U.S., only to be stabbed in the back in 2019, where Donald Trump ordered U.S. troops withdraw for northern Syria. Turkey launched Operation Peace Springs in days, targeting a number of Kurdish forces. The Kurds ended up, for the most part, coming back into Iraq. And it goes into the 50 years of alliance has actually produced autonomy but not statehood. Kurdish have established land that they do see as theirs, but they still have to continue to fight for it. There's still a lot of friction between NATO. There is a bridge there, but as you can see in the photo here, it is heavily damaged from how the West has treated the Kurds. The statement "no friends but the mountains" is a common phrase used by the Kurds when referred to the U.S. Because the U.S. often comes to either to ask the Kurds for help, or they start to aid the Kurds in their fight for their own land, or just to protect their lands, and then we withdraw and leave them. Is a common pattern. And now, currently what's going on, it seems like they're looking to do it again. The CIA is looking to arm an Iranian Kurdish into starting some sort of ground war into Iran, which once again does not look like it's going to fare well in the end from the Kurds for it. Actually, this slide is kind of out of order here, but we'll still go with it. Okay, so yeah, with that group, we got five major groups. You got the PJAC, the Kurdish Democratic Party. Is a lot of other groups in that, but their goal is to overthrow the Islamic Republic in their area. They do not want to take over all the lands of Iran, aka Persia. They just want their own area, which at one time they had before. It seems like a lot of wars in the Middle East go back to what happened in World War One and World War Two, where that land was divided up. Okay. And this is the U.S. operation playbook so far. We did strikes, CIA armament, direct coordination, and then abandonment. The question that defines this moment is, will in 2026 by another chapter in the 50-year cycle? Because this is a common occurrence by the U.S. Follow the coalition of political forces of Iranian Kurdistan, track U.S. citizen. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm saying that wrong. Okay, so the answer will be shaped. It will add. God, I'm saying this all wrong. Okay, let's start it over again. Okay, so the question that defines this moment is, will in 2026 it be the same chapter to where the United States starts providing weapons, urging the Kurds to fight, a war goes, it gets heavy, things go bad, the politics come in, it's not a real positive thing seen by the US citizens, and then the US abandons the Kurds and they get slaughtered again and have to retreat back into Iraq. I hope that's not the case. And I'm just going to show you a couple videos that go a little bit depth. I'm also going to show the links to the full video here on here, so I will show that. One second.
Up in the Zagros Mountains have long lived a people called the Kurds. They're a people with a centuries-long history of fighting back against invaders who have crossed through their lands, resisting conquest in the name of defending their shared cultural identity. Some living as nomads, a people with no friends but these mountains. Eventually, the Ottoman Empire did take over all of this territory, but even then, the Kurds maintained large amounts of autonomy and freedom in their land. Then came World War I, when the European powers defeated the Ottoman Empire and conquered all of this. The winners got together and discussed how they would carve it up between them. If you look back at old European maps, you'll see that all of this area would be labeled Kurdistan, an area where the Kurdish people lived and had some self-rule. So while drawing these lines, the British wanted to mark all of this as Kurdish territory, paving a way for an independent country for the Kurds. But the new leader of Turkey opposed this plan. He didn't want to give all of this land and resources to the Kurds. So he pushed the European forces out of Turkey. They gave up on this plan to give the Kurds their own land. And in the end, instead of drawing borders around the Kurds, the Europeans drew borders through them. What could have been Kurdistan was now 5 different territories. The Kurds split between them. But at first, these were just lines on a map, and the Kurds continued to move through this region. Eventually, the Europeans left, and these became independent countries with leaders who wanted to consolidate and centralize power. So these lines hardened, restricting the Kurds' movement and their livelihood in this region. But even still, across this region, the Kurds didn't give up on their idea of someday gaining independence, self-rule, or maybe even a country of their own. I don't like the feeling of being
And that right there is just like one brief history on the beginning of Kurdistan, of the goal of Kurdistan for it, and just how World War One and World War Two kind of played a role into that. And then we're gonna watch another video that kind of explains that in the scenario as well.
On the morning of October 7, 2019, a Syrian Kurdish commander named Masloum Abdi picked up a telephone in northeastern Syria and called a number in Washington that he had been given by American military officers who had fought alongside his forces for 4 years. He needed to speak to someone who could tell him whether the reports coming in from his border positions were true. Whether American soldiers were actually withdrawing from the observation posts that had stood as a physical guarantee between his people and the Turkish military that had been threatening to cross the border for months. Whether the partnership that had cost his forces 11,000 dead in the campaign against the Islamic State was about to be ended by a tweet. The call did not produce the answer he needed, because the answer was yes. Within 72 hours of that telephone call, Turkish forces and their allied Syrian proxy militias had crossed the border into Kurdish-controlled territory in northeastern Syria. Within a week, towns that Kurdish forces had held and administered for years were changing hands. Within a month, a security architecture that had taken 4 years and thousands of Kurdish lives to build had been fundamentally dismantled. And the American soldiers who had stood at those observation posts, who had eaten with Kurdish commanders and attended the funerals of Kurdish fighters and built the relationships that produced the most effective ground campaign against the Islamic State in the history of that conflict, were gone, ordered out. In some cases, visibly uncomfortable about the order they had been given. Mazlum Abdi had been through this before. His people had been through this before. They had been through it in 1991 and in 1975 and in 1946 and in versions before that which passed without the world paying enough attention to record them properly. The Kurds are the largest ethnic group on earth without a state of their own. Somewhere between 30 and 40 million people spread across Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran, speaking a language older than most of the borders that divide them, with a national identity so coherent and so persistent that it has survived a century of suppression by 4 different governments simultaneously. And for the better part of that century, they have been useful to the United States of America in moments of American need, and expendable in the moments that followed. This is the story of that pattern, and it requires honesty about what it means when the most powerful nation on earth makes a promise to people who have no one else to make promises to them, and then decides that keeping it is inconvenient. Before we go any further, if you find this kind of history valuable, hit subscribe and drop a like.
Gotcha. And yeah, once again, that's just another example, and I will drop a link to this video if you want to see the rest of it toward the end of the video. It will be down in the details area of the YouTube channel. One second. And this next video is just going to talk about a certain sector of the Kurdish army.
In the ruins of northeastern Syria, an all-female army fights for survival and freedom. They are the Kurdish Women's Protection Units, known as the YPJ. These fearless women have battled ISIS and stood against the might of Turkey's military. But their war, which rages to this day, is not just one of guns and bombs. It's an ideological battle, a struggle for the right to exist as equals of men, in a part of the world where such a notion is so often rejected.
از همه از یپجمه از جنکم و از دکارم پاراستنا آخا خاجی بکیم پاراستنا گلی خاجی بکیم پاراستنا نرخ خاجی نرخن مروباهی جی بکیم.
In this episode, my cameraman Charlie Craven and I travel to Rojava, a fledgling democracy blighted by war, where women from across the world have come to join the YPJ's revolution. We visit a YPJ command center and speak with members and families to learn why so many women are willing to risk everything for the cause. We also sit down with a father whose daughter left her life in the UK to join the YPJ and never came back.
In fact, when she said to me, "Dad, I'm going to Rojava," I said, "Well, it's been nice knowing you." And I wish I had not said that. I wish I'd talked to her. I wish I'd said, "So tell me about it."
This is the YPJ's Command and Control Center in Hasaka province, the beating heart of the group's operations. Inside this compound, new recruits are trained, their fallen sisters are remembered, and war plans are drawn.
Behind me is the command center for the YPJ, the Women's Protection Units. This is where all of the major military decisions are made and disseminated to the different units. You can also hear the sound of a generator in the background. This is commonplace here because make sure that the power stays on in the background.
When Syria's civil war erupted in 2011, The Kurds formed a mixed-gender militia, the YXG, to protect their territories in the north. 2 years later, the all-female YPJ was created as women seized the opportunity.
And as you can see, how they were formed related to the Syrian ISIS war, U.S. war, Western war that occurred that brought it up. And like I said, if you want to see the rest of this video, I'll show the link in the details of the channel. I just got 2 more videos I just want to show. And this just talks about a betrayal by the West.
Once hailed as heroes, Kurdish fighters now lie wounded and betrayed. The West that cheered their victories against ISIS is gone, leaving blood spilled and promises broken. From hospital beds to hunger strikes, they ask, who will pay the debt of their blood, and will anyone answer? Recovering from a gunshot wound in a hospital bed in Kamishli, northeastern Syria, Kurdish fighter Mitan Sharesh sums up his view of the West in a single word: betrayal. According to The Telegraph, Sharesh is among the thousands of Kurdish combatants who once formed the backbone of the US and UK-backed campaign against Islamic State, a partnership that dismantled the group's self-declared caliphate and drove its fighters from their strongholds. Today, as Syrian government forces advance and Kurdish units retreat into shrinking territory near the Turkish border, that alliance has all but vanished. Speaking from his hospital bed this week, Sharesh accused Western powers of abandoning the very fighters they once praised.
The coalition forces have done nothing for us. We worked together for so many years against Islamic State, but they haven't offered us any support. I say it openly, they betrayed us.
Another Kurdish activist, Sidam Mohammed, is now on hunger strike, protesting what he describes as worsening conditions and international silence. Speaking this week, he framed the issue as a moral debt left unpaid.
We aren't begging the world to give us our rights. We're owed a debt, and we're collecting it. Our blood flowed, now pay us the price of our blood. The US-led coalition took on the responsibility to become our guarantors. Under the coalition, our comrades were martyred. Who will pay what's owed? For as long the coalition owes this debt, they shouldn't stay silent.
The Kurdish sense of abandonment stands in stark contrast to the early years of the fight against Islamic State. After a wave of devastating terror attacks in the early 2010s, Washington selected Kurdish-led forces as its primary ground partner in Syria. In places like Kobani, US helicopters delivered weapons, equipment and aid, helping turn the tide against IS and raising hopes among Kurds long persecuted under Ba'athist rule. Kurdish forces went on to secure large parts of northern and eastern Syria, guarding detention camps holding thousands of captured IS fighters and preventing the group's resurgence. Despite its apparent support for Mr. Sharar, the US is now scrambling to evacuate up to 7,000 IS militants from his clutches, with flights shuttling back and forth to Iraq. After that, Washington is considering a complete withdrawal of the remaining 1,000 troops stationed in Syria after a 12-year campaign.
We are not receiving any support from the US. A few public statements won't stop the genocide against us. They are asking us to surrender, so we don't see any support.
And there again is the circle again. We provide them weapons, fighting, we fight alongside of them, and then we end up leaving. All right. And this is a guy that was in the Marines, and he ended up going and being embedded with ISIS. Well, not with ISIS, with Kurdish fighters, and he just talks about his experiences.
I've been arrested by Iranian-backed factions in Iraq. I have volunteered multiple years in Kurdish militant groups such as the YPG and the YBS. I've spent time with PJAK, the Iranian fighters that reside in Iraq. I've spent time with all these groups. I've seen the pain that they have from all the countries that have promised them things, and it doesn't add up to much. And this is all relevant today as we're looking at them potentially being funded by the US government, as well as supported by the Israelis in order to take back Iran to the people from this regime that holds it captive. And with all this, I have insider knowledge on what's happening in Iran. I have multiple fans of the page that reached out to me after the protests saying, yes, it was a massacre. We want to rise up, but we don't know how. We don't know how to use weapons. We don't know how to go and conduct ambushes, how to use guerrilla techniques, and that's exactly where we're at today. All over the news right now, it looks like the coalition is getting ready to support these Kurdish groups to fight on behalf of the Iranian people inside of Iran. So I'm going to explain all the Kurdish groups that are aligned and the situation with all of them. And every time I do this on my channel, people usually click away. But I recommend you don't do it, because as things are looking right now, it looks like they're going to be our entry point into taking back Iran from this regime on the ground in support of the people who also want this. So first of all, the Kurds have been used by the US and other coalition partners to fight on their behalf for decades. In Syria, there was the YPG. This is the first group that I joined after the Marine Corps. In Iraq, there's the YBS and Peshmerga. These are two heavily Kurdish groups in Iraq that have completely different political leanings. So their ideologies are different, but they're Kurds nonetheless. And also in Iraq is the mostly Turkish Kurds called the PKK, which has been designated as a terrorist organization by every country in the world, and they hide in the mountains of Iraq, in northern Iraq. And lastly, we have the Iranian Kurds called the PJAK fighters, who also reside in Iraq because they were kicked out by the Iranian regime since back in the 90s. So the group we're focusing on right now, the one that's in the news and it's going to be in the news in the future, is PJAK. Now, fun fact, they've accounted for over 70% of the attacks on IRGC affiliated groups in Iraq from 2015 to 2025. Now, one thing to know about Iraq, they also have a problem with ISIS. They did, especially in the past. And it wasn't just the Kurdish groups who fought against them. Iran was also against ISIS. So the reason we see so much bombings in Iraq is because the PMF forces, the Popular Mobilization Forces, which are heavily funded and manned by Iranians from the IRGC and other groups inside of Iran, they are Iranian government affiliated. They came to Iraq for security during the ISIS campaigns. So 70% of the attacks on the IRGC affiliated groups in Iraq have been conducted by PJAK. They are our top ally when it comes to countering Iranian influence inside of Iraq. So the coalition already has good relations with them. They are a well-known strategic ally of the USA. But here's the problem. Every time the USA has worked with the Kurds, it's always been strategically. When the time comes that they are needed, we support them. But it usually doesn't go further than that. The YPG in Syria was recently taken over completely by the new Syrian regime that's ran by a prior Al-Qaeda leader. And this happened just 3 weeks ago. And now they have to be integrated into this new Syrian army. So the Kurds just got over this, the abandonment from the coalition in support of their democratic values they were trying to make in Syria. They held about half of Syria for a decade or so. And just 3 weeks ago, it was completely lost. Now, when this all happened, the YPG fighters, they didn't just stay there. I mean, yes, there are some YPG fighters still in Syria reintegrating into their army, but a lot of them, I would say most of them, have fled Syria and went back to Iraq. In the northern Iraq area, that's where all these fighters are kind of staying whenever things get too rough. And when I speak about all these different groups, they can be kind of clumped into one. They have the same ideology. A lot of the fighters bounce from PJAK to the YBS to the YPG to any of the other groups. They all work together, and that's how I have experience with PJAK. They were the ones who got me into Syria in the first place and got me out. They were the drivers, the chauffeurs. They had to stay in their tunnel systems when the drones were above us. They bounce from one group to another quite frequently. So when one side needs help, all of them respond. That's what you need to know. So despite
Yeah, so there it goes. There's just a couple videos that show the breakdown. And once again, go and support these people's channels. I really like what they do, and that's why I don't show the whole videos. I want you to go to their channels and in your time, spare time, just check out the video just to learn more. And because what all this is, what does all this video brings this to is what's okay. Here we go. Here we go. This is what I'm talking about right here. And not this commercial. This is what I'm talking about. Hold on one second. Let's get this.
This just in, it's big. A U.S. official telling Fox thousands of Iraqi Kurds have launched a ground offensive in Iran.
You need
Decimated,
millions.
destroyed, defeated. All words the Pentagon used to describe Iran's various military forces on day 5.
I'm sorry, but I gotta react to that. That's bullshit. They have millions. They have about 1 million active soldiers, and if they are invaded on the ground, it would become more millions with an S on the end of it, and it's only a couple of thousands of Kurds. They don't have enough, but I'll let him finish.
Of Operation Epic Fury. Moments ago, President Trump touting its success.
So we're in a very strong position now, and their leadership is just rapidly going. Everybody that seems to want to be a leader, they end up dead. And it's an amazing thing that's taking place. Their missiles are being wiped out rapidly. Their launchers are being wiped out. They're attacking their neighbors. They're attacking their, in some cases, allies, or not so long ago allies. And, you know, it's really a nation that was out of control, and they would have used it on us if we let them.
The Secretary of War said,
"We are just getting started."
Yeah, I mean, this just sounds like the early part of the Iraq War. It's all positive, yes. To begin in a war is easy. You're dropping, shooting missiles from afar that you're going in, but over long term, people get fatigued, which people are already fatigued when more body bags start coming home because there's so much that missiles can do, blowing up buildings and doing that. That's from afar. But eventually to fully, which they have never defined what winning a war is not, once again, it's not defined again what winning is. They'll just say we're winning and nobody will really know what that means. But I hope this actually dies down, and next month we're talking about how it just goes into something else. And last but not least, everybody wave hi to Uncle Epstein. Have a good day.